Now, there's a lecture tonight in Blackheath, deep in the Black Country, talking about poverty, women in poverty, women in the workplace in poverty. It's been given by Frances O'Grady, who's the General Secretary of the TUC. It's all part of a much bigger pattern, which I'm going to talk about now to Rob Johnston, who's here from the TUC, because this is the inaugural Mary Macarthur lecture. For those who don't know, give me a little biog of Mary Macarthur.
Well, Mary Macarthur was the organiser who, back in 1910, came to the Black Country as there's a real issue in chain making. Predominantly female, very isolated individual units, and at the time who were fighting for a minimum wage in that industry. At the time they said they couldn't be organised, they're female, they're isolated. Now Mary Macarthur had the determination and the tenacious attitude to say this is not right. These women deserve decent pay. They're being exploited, the employers have reneged upon a pay deal. And she went round and spoke to those women and gave them the confidence and the ability to organise and come back and win for the first time in UK history, the first ever minimum wage in a trade. A real significant moment. And as we look to today, where people say in many of these workplaces it's isolated, people can't be organised, can't stand up for their rights. Mary Macarthur's impact in Cradle Heath back in 1910 resonates today, and many things she's campaigning about are issues today. So a truly significant figure in the history of the Black Country, a truly significant figure in the history of the trade union movement.
And I suppose you might take the stance that what Frances O'Grady is saying today, there is a parallel between then and now.
Well, but it's parallel between then and now. I mean, if we look in the West Midlands at the moment, we learnt last year that the gender pay gap increased from £5,000 to £5,500 last year, a widening gender pay gap. In many areas, in West Bromwich, for example, 62% of women, part-time women, are paid below the living wage. 62%. And the Labour Force Survey has called the West Midlands the zero-hours capital of the UK. And it's women who are particularly impacted, women who are particularly losing out in recession and austerity of public services being cut. And this is unacceptable. 50% of the country is women. 50% of the workforce is women. 40-odd years since the First Equal Pay Act, women are still being discriminated against. Absolute tragedy, and the issues of 1910 are absolutely relevant here in 2016.
So you say that they're being discriminated against today. Is that because there is not the same power, or unions don't hold the same power that they maybe did 30, 40 years ago?
What I would say is that actually one of the solutions to inequality is stronger unions. So where we find in workplaces where we have union representation, some of these issues, while still there, are less, and stronger unions are absolutely essential for tackling those sorts of discrimination for women and for other workers. So that's one of the solutions. But the actual fragmentation in work, in the workforce and the insecure nature of work is making it more difficult for the type of jobs actually that men and women need.
You mentioned the figure of 62% were below the living wage. What sort of jobs are they doing?
Well, we're seeing actually a polarisation in the economy. So at the very top, if you work in the financial services, you're doing very well. In the middle, there's been a destruction of jobs and a plethora of jobs at the bottom in agency work, in zero-hours contracts, part-time, flexible, insecure rights. So in retail, in social care, part-time contracts are the norm. So it's making that sort of the rise of the gigging economy in many sense. People are not expecting full-time work, aren't expecting the permanent contract, and it's a real danger. It's a real danger for the long-term health of the Black Country, because if people are not going to have secure work and money in their pockets and they feel secure, they ain't going to spend, and areas like this are not going to grow long-term. Real problem.
So are people frightened that if they become unionised or they come to you or someone else and say, look, you know, we're all on zero-hours contract, that people are going to say, well, OK, don't come and work here because there are lots of people who will?
No, I think people are not frightened about union. I think people are frightened and insecure in their job. We live in an age of insecurity. It's a decade of lost growth. There's a real undermining of savings and security, and that's the real issue. Where people are coming together and unionising and securing those jobs. I mean, people in unions are better paid, have better holidays, better security, and less discrimination, and that is a fact. And that if ever there was a need for one, there is now. And those employers who say zero-hours contracts are great, it gives flexibility in the workforce. Well, I've never met one worker who has said, I've voluntarily given up a permanent contract to move to 0 hours contract. I've never voluntarily given up that stability and that security. Workers don't ask for a lot. They ask for a little bit to get by, a little bit to feed the family, and a little bit to save for their retirement. And in 2016, we really do have to ask ourselves, should we have this debate about whether work security is a right or whether it's something that can be put on the altar of economic competitiveness? There's a real issue.
You mentioned about them not getting the living wage, and Frances O'Grady tonight is going to be talking about what she calls work poverty and poverty wages. Are those the same thing, or is there still a gap between living wage or being below it and getting poverty pay?
Well, we talk about the living wage. Now, the living wage as a concept does not mean when you're earning a living wage you're having a huge amount of money. It's about just having a little bit to occasionally, once in a while, have a takeaway for your kids. And if people are being paid below the living wage and on the minimum wage, you are talking to people who are struggling to clothe, to eat, to heat your home. It is real poverty. And we do need to generate the type of jobs that is going to give people greater income, greater security, and to grow. We do need to grow those middle-class, secure jobs if we're actually going to grow out of poverty and see economic regeneration and sustainability. This part of the world was the engine of the Industrial Revolution. We grew from here, and if we're going to have growth, we've got to ask who are the rewards for? Do we need to see all the money disappear down into the capital and financial speculation and disappearing overseas, whilst the rest, everyone just scrapes by on poverty pay? We don't have to accept that. We can make a political choice to invest in skills, to invest in jobs, and to actually say we have the ability to shape the type of jobs. It is a real political choice. There's nothing inevitable about poverty pay, and we do need to change that debate and say those middle class jobs, social mobility, social opportunity for all people in this area is something we need to move towards, because otherwise 10, 15 years time the access to housing and for people and the young people today is a perilous thought.
Just go back to Mary Macarthur again, this inaugural lecture tonight. I'm just thinking that over 100 years ago, a woman coming out and fighting like this on behalf of people would have been a political rarity.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the whole suffragette movement and women in society. I mean, the whole point of the debate is not just about in the economy, but women in society. Absolutely. We have to vote them and to stay at their home and to be seen and not heard. Unfortunately, there's a lot of issues about that today, but absolutely, it was groundbreaking at the time. And as people have said to me, it's not just Mary Macarthur that was the leader, but the women themselves, to show the courage to stand up and say, this is wrong. These bosses reneged on a deal. And they thought they could do, because they thought women didn't have the ability to stand up and speak out. Well, they did. And all this talk we hear at the moment about unions being macho and being male. The majority of trade union members today are female. And the majority of people being exploited are female. And it's women saying, this is wrong, and actually finding a voice. And the union vehicle, people like Mary Macarthur, is an inspiration for unions. What are they? They're just a vehicle for workers to find a collective voice and to have their say. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing tonight. And
her part with the Chainmakers in Cradley Heath, I mean, it has resulted in her part. There's an exhibition at the Black Country Living Museum, isn't there, that remembers her? Yes, I mean, there is the Black Country Museum, and we've had the Chainmakers Festival, which originally was at the Black Country Museum a number of years ago, has moved from the museum, and now on July the 2nd, it's going to be on Cradley Heath High Street. That's your very centre of where the dispute took place, and at Mary Macarthur Garden there is now a statue, a permanent memorial, and now we're having the festival right back in the heart of Cradley Heath, where the strike was, commemorating the past, recognising the challenges of today, and building for the future. So remembering the past, understanding the present, and building for the future. She actually managed to get herself arrested, didn't she, in the House of Commons, and taken off to Holloway. Well, I mean... That was a poverty protest, as I recall. Yeah, with direct action. I mean, she would also, I would say, actually, she understood the power of the media. Actually, she was very innovative, and the use of cinema for highlighting and bringing attention to the issues facing women in 1910. And we look at today, actually, and some of the challenges we have in terms of communicating our messages, highlighting the impact of food banks and 0 hours, the use of Twitter and social action and direct action. Yeah, she was incredibly innovative at the time, and she understood organising.
She understood the need to understand where people were and to go on a journey and to empower the women. She understood it wasn't about her, it was about the women and taking on a journey.
Well, as I said right at the start, Frances O'Grady, who is the General Secretary of the TUC, is making this inaugural Mary Macarthur lecture tonight. Exactly where is it again?
It's at the Blackheath Coronation Club, 7 o'clock tonight.
And can people just turn up on the night and get in?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there are limited places. I mean, it's nearly full out, but there are places available. And people are in doubt, then to just log on to tuc.org.uk/Midlands, and contact details are there. But there are still places available.
Rob Johnston from the TUC, thanks for joining us. I'll see you after the break.